So, in talking to so many of you, whether via email or in person or at conferences, one of the biggest pain points I'm hearing over and over again is the fact that so many of you are looking for a homestead property. You thought you were getting ready to buy one. You're trying to maybe move into a different size of homestead property, and you're frustrated with the state of real estate at the moment. I know this is a huge sticking point, not just for homesteaders, but for everyone. Interest rates feel high, the market feels wonky. And so I have been trying to figure out how I can help you guys with this problem for a while now. But when people come to me for advice on how we bought our homestead, honestly, I don't have a lot of personal experience in this realm because when we purchased our place back in 2008, the world was very different and the interest rates were different and the real estate market was different. And so I feel a little bit at a loss. So today I am so excited to be bringing an expert on the show to help discuss and problem solve this very topic. So Anna Young is a senior loan officer with Rural First, which serves Kansas, but they have affiliations all over the United States. And so we're going to talk about that as we roll along here. It's not that you have to be in Kansas to get a lot out of this episode. And prior to Rural First, she has worked as an underwriter, a lender, a business developer. She's done all kinds of roles in this world. And I cannot wait to hear some of her strategies for how we can navigate this market and hopefully get some of you into the homestead of your dreams. So welcome, Anna. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks, Jill. I appreciate you letting me be on today. It's going to be a fun conversation.
It is, yes. And I've been looking for the right person to have this conversation with. And so this is going to be good. I'm so pumped.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in. I want to start with a bird's eye view because this is the tension. This is the problem point I'm hearing so many people repeat over and over. It feels like to us, the consumers, and I'd love to hear your perspective, of course, but we feel like the real estate market's going up, and people are like, it's never going to come down. It's never going to adjust, and I'm never going to be able to afford anything. So what's your perspective on that situation, and how did we get here, and where do you think we're headed?
Yeah, sure. So I work for Rural First. Rural First is part of the farm credit system, and we specialize in financing the consumer. We're a consumer arm of farm credit. So people who want to live in the country, we finance their land, construction on new homes, and also existing homes on acreage. So our bread and butter is that people who want to live in a rural area. So that is definitely the people we want to work with and the people that we are here to serve truly in our job function through farm credit. I think as far as how we got here, there's a lot of things, right? But obviously, if we remember back to 4 years ago, COVID changed a lot of things in the world and definitely ignited a spark, a trend. I guess you could probably a more accurate way to put it, but a trend of people saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to live in the city anymore. I don't have to live in an urban area. I would prefer to live in a rural area. And so you saw supply and demand, right? So you saw a demand for people wanting to live a different way, wanting to live a different lifestyle. And obviously there was a lot that came out of COVID, good and bad, but this is definitely a trend that has continued post-COVID where people are saying, hey, I have flexibility in my work, or I can do things differently than what I did before. And part of that is I want a different lifestyle for my family a lot of times. And that involves moving into an area where there's less people in a more rural setting. Anytime you have that type of shift, which drastic shift, right? And how things had happened prior. Anytime you have that kind of shift, you're going to have changes. It's a disruptor. It's a disruptor in how the real estate market has historically presented or behaved is probably a good way to say it. So I would say COVID ignited it. And here we are you're still seeing strong demand in that marketplace. As a buyer, you just have to be aware of where you're at and be prepared to play in that marketplace, essentially.
Do you foresee, I know you're not a prophet, I'm always curious, but I don't hold anyone to anything they say, but do you see the market coming down or adjusting at all? Or do you think this is like the new normal?
Yeah, that's really hard to say. And I think every marketplace is going to be different as well. So you're going to see markets that maybe they do correct some, right? And when I say correct, maybe demand lessens, right? I will tell you, so I work in central and western Kansas. I feel like demand has been very steady. I don't think it's bonkers like it was at one point in time, but it's very steady still. And when I talk to people in my network, realtors, insurance agents, other bankers, I have a lot of friends who are other bankers too. We don't necessarily work in the same space, but we're still in the lending world. they'll tell you the same thing. It's, hey, we're still seeing steady demand and people are still buying potentially. So that's going to leave those prices where they are. If you have whether there's a drastic shift or not, I don't know. I can't speak to that. But in terms of the marketplace, you still have people. I would say that trend is continuing. And so prices will align. I do think, at least in my area, there's been maybe some properties are sitting a little bit longer. Still not long periods of time, but sitting a little bit longer than maybe what they would have a year ago. Higher end properties, higher dollar properties, those are sitting longer. But they're still selling. Things are still moving, right? So you don't have a slug in the marketplace by any means.
I have noticed that here locally that, like you said, the higher end properties aren't going as fast as they were. But it feels like the medium, lower end properties are still like selling like hotcakes.
Exactly. And in that realm, one thing to keep in mind there is, hey, every time the dollar amount goes up, the pool of buyers shrinks. So I had a guy recently who was looking at buying a 40-acre parcel and he was going to potentially build on that. He was able to purchase a home on 40 acres for cheaper than what he could have built it for. And so he just shifted gears in his approach. So I think that's the other thing that people, when you're talking about, hey, I'm looking to buy, one thing I will tell people is keep an open mind. You may have an idea of what you want to do and what you want to buy, but ultimately another opportunity may present itself. So if you're prepared and ready to go, like this guy, we had talked and he was pre-approved with us, but also, so he was ready to go. And so he was able to pull the trigger when he needed to on that purchase, even though it was a shift from what he had originally in his mind planned out. It worked out to his benefit, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I have also spoken a little bit to that with folks around location, and which I know not everyone can just shift location if one location is a really high market. I see a lot of folks obsessed with certain areas of the country. Like I'm going to pick on Tennessee for a minute, because every time I travel to Tennessee, it's like everyone there has just gotten there and everyone wants to move there. And everyone is so frustrated by the prices there. I'm like, Tennessee is beautiful, but maybe if you can't afford Tennessee, maybe you move to a different state. Because I feel like, I'm assuming you're also seeing just differences in location. I know you're Kansas, but I'm assuming on your periphery, there's just differences in location and prices in the market and such.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so, so I live just west of Wichita. I cover Rural First is in 20 states. I cover central and western Kansas. That's my footprint that I cover. But yeah, absolutely. Even in the territory that I cover, if you're going to I'm just outside of Wichita. I live about 30 minutes from Wichita. If you're within an hour radius of Wichita, you're going to expect these kind of prices, right? If you're willing to move an hour and a half outside of Wichita, you can get a great deal in a lot of situations. So I think that is really good advice too, in terms of there are affordable properties, but you may have to be flexible on where you want to live and amenities that you want to have close to you. So there's give and take. It's interesting on that trend too, is that a lot, I would say in the last several loans that I've done, I can think of one right now where they're moving from Washington. And that was a big part of it. They're retired and they're like, hey, the property is just more affordable here for us. And so we chose to, pick up and move. And Kansas is accepting residents. So come on over. But
I say that about
real estate.
Yeah, I say that about Wyoming too. And they're like, oh, it's cold. I'm like, yeah, but it's way cheaper than Tennessee and Texas. Yeah. So go on out. We are looking for residents for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So location is a big driver in that, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. I'm curious, can you speak to, let's say someone, maybe they purchased a home in the past, but they've never purchased a rural home or a rural property. What kind of differences or considerations will they need to keep in mind there?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, and just in general, right? When we talk about rural homes and we finance rural properties, I always tell people, I'm like, we finance the weird stuff. A lot of other banks just don't want to touch. A lot of banks have different rules around, they'll finance a home in a highly populated area, no problem. But when it comes to acreage, either bare acreage or a house on land, they really just don't have a good product for it. So number one, make sure you're with a bank who can handle that. Rural First says in 20 states, and we're so always willing, our lenders are great and willing to talk to people about their options. But I will have that happen a lot where I'll talk to people and they're like, I'm pre-approved with such and such bank. And then I was pre-approved with such and such bank. And then they realized it was 25 acres and that doesn't fit in their bucket anymore. And now I have a contract. I'm not approved. Like I'm behind the 8 ball, right? Asking good questions up front is really recommended, and ask those questions. If you're buying bare land and you want to build a house, ask the bank, hey, can you finance the land and the house, and construction on the house? And what does that look like? What do I need to do preparedness wise so that if I buy this land, I can realistically build a house? And so those conversations go together. Or if I'm buying land in a house, hey, what do those terms look like? Because a lot of times, like all of our loan products are conventional. So we don't have a, FHA or those the products are different. A lot of times just from a financial position, you have to be prepared differently with down payment options, or if you're selling a house, right? So sometimes I tell people it's like a buying strategy, and it's worth the time to do it, because it especially go back to what we're talking about with a competitive market. And so if you have a strategy and you have a plan, you can definitely, and it enables you to act quicker and faster and more confidently too. You feel good about what you're doing.
Yes. What's the considerations? I'm thinking specifically first-time buyers, and forgive me, because I am this is not my zone of genius. My brain does not retain this sort of information, but yes, thank you. But 2008, when we were buying our property, it was our first home that we purchased. And so we initially were like, oh, we're going to get some of the first-time home buyer stuff. And then when the bank, like you said, the bank found out, that it was 60 acres, they're like, So, nope. And we had to do, I don't even remember the process, but it was a lot of loopholes and hoops, and it was a whole thing. So if you are going to buy your first home and it is a rural property, can you walk us through what that might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just for sake of example, we'll go back to my guy who's buying a house in 40 acres, right? And a lot of the properties I finance, like you're talking 60 acres, right? They're going to be larger acreages. So what you'd be looking at terms wise, we require 15% down. And that's going to be based off the appraised value of the property. So just keep that in mind. If you're in a competitive situation and you overpay for it and it doesn't appraise, it is based on the appraised value, but 15% down. We are different from a commercial bank in terms of we don't have like PMI, private mortgage insurance. Our loans are not subject to that. That is one thing that is different. But the down payment is going to be higher in terms of if you're a first time home buyer than some of the other more conventional products if you were buying a house in the city, in a highly populated area, potentially. Now, I will tell you, if you are a lot of these people, if you're a homesteader, if you have farm income, right? A lot of times it may open a door with the farm service agency. We do work with them sometimes on first time purchases, but they have an eligibility box too, in terms of, not everyone is eligible for their loans. But I work with a lot of people who are involved in agriculture in some way, or they've worked for a farm, or maybe they have, in some ways they've been involved in agriculture. And so we are able to work with FSA on some of those purchases if they're purchasing different kinds of property. I will say that's probably a minority type situation, but it's always an option worth looking into.
So with that FSA, would they need to potentially, because that's the tricky part that I think a lot of homesteaders, the bucket we find ourselves in, we are buying little ag properties in ag zoned areas, but we're not necessarily commercial ag. So it's this weird gray area. So what would you need to show to the FSA if you were going to be trying to tap into that eligibility? I'm guessing it varies, but could you give us kind of some higher level?
Yeah. And like I said, I don't actually originate those loans, and every county would have a different FSA office that they would work with for eligibility reasons. But the ones that I'll find a lot is where, I have worked for a farmer or a farm operation, so I have a history in farming. And so then they would be eligible for their programs. Or sometimes it's just use of the property. I'm going to operate the land. So bare land, you're going to have a better chance. Let's say I'm going to operate the bare land. They will have programs for those as well.
Okay, so that might be a path for someone if they're struggling to, because I have that question a lot too. I'm so glad you brought that up. They're like, okay, should I buy a property with structure, or should I just buy a blank slate? And I'm always like, well, it depends. But if they are having trouble with the financing, potentially that bare land may be an easier way to get their foot in the door.
Yeah, and we can help them with both. In terms of bare, sometimes the option is, buy bare land first. Find the property that you wanna build on. And I'll encourage people, we don't have a build time frame on our loans. So you can say, hey, I found the 60 acres that I want to build on eventually, and then I'm going to have a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan to get out there and get my house built or get the property established. And so I will tell, and that's why I say sometimes it goes back to just an overall strategy, right? So it's, hey, maybe I can't do everything today. Maybe you can, but if you can't, okay, what's a good plan to get where I ultimately want to be? The bare land, same thing. We can do 15% down if you're just looking at bare land. So I'll have a lot of people who will say, okay, I'm going to buy my 60 acres. I want to build in 3 years. By that point, I'm going to have the land paid for, or I'm going to have a significant amount of equity in the property. And then the next phase is I want to build a barn, right? Or the next phase is I want to build a house. And so the strategy piece comes into play, but you can definitely start with land. So I think the other time, but something I experience with people sometimes is they get overwhelmed by the whole thing, right? So it's, hey, if you break it down into little bite-sized pieces, right? Then it becomes more digestible overall. And I definitely would say, yeah, land first. So I found the perfect property. Let's figure out how to get that bought and done. And then you can move on to the next phase in terms of, okay, and then I want to build my house. Let's figure out what I need to do, what steps I need to take financially to make that happen as well. So overall, you can have a plan overall in terms of how can I reach my goal of living on a land, right? Which ultimately is what people want to do.
Friends, I'm interrupting this episode because I have a big announcement today, one I've been waiting to tell you about. The 2025 Old-Fashioned On Purpose Planner is here. It is ready for you to order. We wanted to get it out earlier than ever this year, so you have plenty of time to start thinking about 2025. And I can say without a doubt, this is our best planner yet. We took all the features you love from previous years, plus some things you've been asking for, and rolled them all into this edition. So the first thing you'll notice, there are tabs. Hallelujah. We have tabs for all of the months and the sections. That's been a huge sticking point for so many of you. We finally got it done. The cover is durable PVC. The paper is luxurious, if I do say so myself. It's thick and silky, and it's not going to bleed. We have monthly spreads. We have weekly spreads. We have spots for your menus, your garden, your kitchen, your animal records, what you're reading, your goals for the year, your project mapping. It's all in here and lots more. This is almost 300 pages of organizational goodness, and it will help keep your old-fashioned life on track, regardless of whether you live on 100 acres or you're homesteading in your backyard. So we have a set number of these that we have printed. We will sell out this year, so don't wait too long. Head on over to prairieplanner.com to get a full look at the inside and all the features and to get your copy. Also, we have a special limited run of some custom planner stickers that you can add on to your order. We're selling out of these as we speak. So if you want the stickers, definitely grab your planner sooner versus later. prairieplanner.com. I cannot wait for you to try it, and definitely post some pictures and tag me over on social once you start putting all of your old-fashioned goodness inside. Okay, so my next question is, what role does credit history play in securing a loan? And if someone maybe has a perfect credit score, what are some steps they can take to help with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And credit does, we are a lender that uses FICO scores for part of our credit approval process. That's very common in the industry as well. I will say if you have no credit score, we can work with you still. We have a manual underwriting process, and I will have those folks every once in a while that pop up. They just say, hey, I have never borrowed money and I don't have a credit score. No problem. We have a manual underwriting system. So it doesn't just throw you out of the gate. If your credit is below our standard, what I encourage people to do is to get their credit score up. Ultimately, it saves you money on interest rate, but it also saves you a lot of headache. So if people's credit is low, what I would encourage them, number one thing is your credit score is made up of several parts, ultimately is how it works. But the biggest one is just paying your bills on time. So the biggest thing that's going to impact your credit score is to get your bills paid on time. And then the second piece that you need is time to show that trend that, hey, I've been paying my bills on time. So if people's credit scores need some work, that's what I'll encourage them. I'll say, hey, take 6 months, take 12 months, whatever you need, get your bills paid on time, take care of business, and get your credit score up. And then we can move on to the next part of the plan.
I think that's a great actionable just tangible step for folks who are feeling antsy to start the process, but they can't do it right now. I think that's a great thing to add to the to-do list is just to get intentional with that. You can feel like you're making some progress. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So zoning, this is a big topic in the homestead world because I think most of us are looking at adding animals to the property, different structures, and zoning can be pretty restrictive. So what should prospective buyers know about zoning laws? What should they be asking before they buy? And especially how can that affect a loan on the property?
Yep, you bet. So this is where, if you're a buyer, it's important to have a good network, right? In all things you're doing. So make sure you have a good lender, make sure you have a good realtor. Your realtor is going to be someone who can really help you with the zoning piece of this. And if they can't answer your zoning questions, maybe it's time to move on to the next realtor. They're going to be a big help for you. I know ones that I've ran into before, and there's certain counties that require so many acres to build to have a structure on the land. And I've ran into that before. They'll call me and say, hey, I'm buying in this county. It's this many acres. And I'll ask them how it's zoned. If they don't know, you can always call your county officials. They'll be able to help you with that. There's several departments within the county municipalities that handle that piece. But so knowing how it's zoned and knowing that before you buy is really important. So just a little bit of due diligence. And like I said, your network can always help you with that as well. In that example where they didn't have enough acres to build, they called me. They're like, hey, I'm getting a great deal on this property. And I'm like, you're getting a great deal because you can't build on it. And I was like, yeah, just doing some due diligence before you sign a contract to get things in motion can save you a lot of headache down the road. If there are restrictions, those are all going to be legally known. So there's a way to get that information before you find yourself in, hey, I purchased this property and now I can't do anything with it. So just a little bit of homework and get your network in place to help you. If you're feeling overwhelmed, again, that can be one of those things that can be overwhelming, but a couple phone calls, a good realtor can really help with that situation.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. I do think, like you said, if it's too good to be true, maybe do some checking. Yeah. I've heard similar stories where they were all excited and, but there's a giant easement through the middle of the property, or it's like there's like a nuclear waste plant next door. I'm like, wait, there's a reason it feels cheap. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. Homework's important and can save a lot of headache. That's for sure.
Yes. Okay. So the big elephant in the room for many people, and honestly, we were trying to sell a commercial piece of real estate a few months back. And we had a lot of prospective buyers, but everyone got really frustrated with interest rates. Like they were ready to buy and then they'd go to their bank and they're like, oh, their interest rates are so high. So I imagine that a lot of residential rural buyers are also feeling that pinch. Do you have any advice? I know interest rates. Do you have any advice on that? Any words of wisdom or comfort? Do you think they'll be adjusting anytime soon?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that topic?
You bet. So rate-wise, I would say over the last 30 to 60 days, long-term fixed rates, which is what I'm dealing with. In all of our products that we're recommending, they have a fixed rate with it. And that is what I recommend people utilize on whether they're purchasing land or building a house or buying a house, that they're using a fixed rate. Over the last 30, 60 days, we have definitely seen rates start to trend down compared to same time last year, even same time 6 months ago, even 6 months ago. So you've definitely seen rates trend down. Whether that continues in the future is really hard to know. If I knew that, I'd love to tell, but
yes, sure.
But in terms of, I can say over the past 30, 60 days, you definitely see that trending back down. Now, back down to historic lows? No, but down substantially compared to, they're 1% lower than what they were 6 months ago. So that's a big number. The other thing I will tell people is that, okay, so I've been a loan officer for 11 years, and over the course of 11 years, there have been multiple ups and downs rate-wise. So it's like a roller coaster. I think people feel like there was 2 time frames, right? It was like pre-COVID and post-COVID. Yeah. And pre-COVID, there was this low period and a high period, and now it's a high period. That's not really true. I can think back to February or January of 2020, and we were anticipating rates to be in the 6s that year, right? And then COVID happened, and they obviously were not. But so I guess when you think about the rate market, don't get stuck in that land of there's low rates and high rates, and now I'm in high rates, right? You have to think of it in terms of things ebb and flow. And if you really love a property and you are prepared financially to purchase it, you can always refinance. You can always access a lower rate if they dip in the future. I think there's an expression, buy the property, date the rate. And that's true to an extent. But I think also, again, if you're prepared and ready to go for the right property, the rate is a secondary thought, right? If you are prepared financially, and then you always have the flexibility to move down. We offer a really great rate conversion option for us where people can, they have the option to lower their rate once a year for a flat fee. They don't have to refinance.
Nice.
It's a really nice perk for our customers. It's an interest rate conversion is what it's called. So we do offer that, and it's a great way for people to do that very quickly and very cheap, very affordably. So we offer that. And then it's another thing, you know what you're getting into in the beginning when you're purchasing that property or home.
I think that's such great advice. And I was talking to one of my really smart business friends a couple months back, and he was saying that same thing. Like, rates have been so cyclical, and we get so on this magnifying glass of this one period of history, and this is where we're at now is the worst or whatever. And I think it's such great advice just to keep looking back at the roller coaster and see the bigger trend. And also, if you do love your property that you're looking at, don't let that stop you. I love that you have that option where they can adjust it down without having to do a full refinance. That's brilliant. But yeah, thank you for that. I think that hopefully will give some comfort to a lot of people who are pretty wound up about that.
Yeah, sure. Good. I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. So if someone is looking at rural properties, would like the presence of existing structures, let's say barns, wells, off-grid systems, things like that, would that affect the loan approval process in any way?
Not for us. A couple things. We are a rural lender. Like I said, that's our bread and butter. And so we love acreage. We love outbuildings. We love farm facilities. We're good with all that. So those things do not throw loans out of our bucket. We know what to do with it. We're used to that type of collateral. And we can finance. Sometimes all people, they're buying a property and it already has an existing barn on it, right? Or shop or shed. What I've learned at Rural First is there's regional differences for what you call outbuildings, but it may have a structure on it, and then their next step is to build a house, or it has small cattle facility, something like that. It does not change the parameters for us for our loans if it's bare land or a home. Those things are completely within our normal realm of dealing with.
And that might be one of the benefits of going with a lender who specializes in rural versus a standard lender, because that's not going to trip you guys up. Maybe it would trip up another situation.
Exactly. The other thing we can do is that we're very flexible once you're in the property. So a lot of times I'll finance bare ground, then they build a house, then they come back and they want to build a barn, right? Or they want to build a barn and some outbuilding structures, whatever it looks like for their operation. And we can handle all of those pieces. Or they'll buy, hey, I bought 30 acres and now the 10 acres next to me is coming up for sale, or my neighbor wants to sell me the 10 acres next. Great. We can handle all those pieces because we are very flexible. We hold our loan paper. We're not selling your loan. So we have that flexibility to work with people. And we understand it's a lifestyle, right? So it's not just a one-time thing. There may be other things that come up over time, and we want to be there to support our customers in those needs.
Okay. Great advice. This is more of just like a personal curiosity question, because I just love this kind of stuff. What kind of trends are you seeing now in rural homes and what people are buying, what people are liking? Do you see any, I just love to see any patterns or hear about any patterns that you're seeing.
I'm so glad you asked that. Yes, we do. So you're always going to have your traditional stick-built home. People still love those. So that's still definitely happening. We've seen a ton or not a ton, but we've definitely seen an increase in more barn dominium type structures. Mm-hmm. And barn dominium can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, right? Sometimes it's a stick-built home and they just are putting tin on its tin siding, tin roof. And sometimes it's a true barn dominium. And we treat those like a conforming stick-built home. We finance a ton of those. And a lot of times it's a lifestyle thing, right? There's some really cool barn dominium structures out there. Sometimes people use it as again, if you go back to strategy, right? It's just a step along the way. It's, hey, I'm going to build, I'm going to buy the property. I'm going to put up a shed or with living quarters, and then I'm going to build a house, right? So we see it in multiple facets, but that is definitely a trend that we are seeing as popular, and we have no issues with them. We're very flexible on working with barn builders and customers who want to build barn dominiums. I will say one thing for my territory, and this may be common in other areas as well. I feel like one reason barn dominiums are popular in less populated areas is because traditional builders sometimes can just be harder to access. I know when I get into Western Kansas, sometimes people are a year, 2 year, 3 years out for a traditional custom home builder, where a barn builder can get in there sooner and faster. Or sooner and faster is the same thing, but they can get in there sooner. So
that's interesting. I've been seeing a ton, like on Pinterest and just like even on Facebook, the algorithm's been showing me a ton of barn dominiums lately. So it's interesting that you say that. Yeah.
Sign, Jill. Maybe you have a barn in your future.
I don't know. Gosh, if I have any more building projects, I will just sink with me down the road. But that's interesting. Okay. Trying to think as we wrap up here. We've covered a lot of good grounds. Any other bits of advice or thoughts that maybe we haven't covered that you want the audience to know if they're in this position looking to buy rural in the next little bit?
One thing I would say, I think in this, just encourage people to, when you have a goal in mind, it may take sacrifice in other areas. And then the steps of homework and being prepared, it goes together. If you're saying, hey, I want to build a house or I want to buy a piece of land, it may mean, hey, I'm putting off this vehicle purchase, or I'm putting off, this in my life for a while, not forever, just for a while till I can get this done. And just encourage people to have a plan from that standpoint in terms of overall. And the other thing I would say is get pre-approved. It doesn't cost anything to talk to a lender and get a pre-approval in place. Our pre-approvals are good for 6 months. So it gives people, and I really like that personally and as a lender, because it gives you a nice runway to act on. So you can have the underwriting. It's, hey, I know I want to purchase something and my budget is $500,000, right? So I'm pre-approved for this dollar amount. I have my down payment. But the other thing it allows to do is to really talk about, hey, what does this plan look like? If I buy this, am I selling another property? Am I not selling another property? Or what's my plan B? Do I need a bridge loan if I'm building? So you can have a full plan in place, and we don't charge for our pre-approvals. So it allows a lot of flexibility. And like I said, just a nice runway. If you're looking at, hey, there's 10 different properties I'm looking at, right? Great. You're good to go. And then if you get out there and you love the property, you can slide that realtor your pre-approval letter and get a contract right now. So it speeds up. So taking some steps on the front end can really speed up the process and make for a really smooth transaction.
That's great advice. And just as I love action steps, and I always love putting a nice bow on these episodes where people can really do something tangible. So you've given a lot of good tidbits here. So as I've just been jotting them down, if someone's looking to buy, let's say the next 1 to 3 years or now, you said have a plan, right? So be ready to make those sacrifices and be thinking ahead. You said get that pre-approval. You said work on your credit score. If it's not ideal, you can start paying bills on time, just making sure that's all nice and shiny. Is there anything else you would add to that list?
Sometimes it's just as simple as making a phone call. And I would say you may not be ready to get pre-approved, but you could definitely go ahead and make that phone call I'll talk to people, and we don't actually do anything for a year or 2 years. Or I got a text yesterday to a guy, we've been talking for a year, and that's fine. The lenders at Rural First, we are definitely here to help people, and you have here to serve our rural communities and the people who live in them or want to live in them. And make a phone call, reach out, and you can definitely get that plan in motion.
Yeah, awesome. And sometimes those little baby steps of action, I preach this all the time. That's just all it takes to get that little bit of motivation rolling, that dopamine hit, and then you start doing other things to get you there. And it can turn that big fuzzy dream into something that's real a lot faster than you think.
Yeah, I like it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And they can go to our website. If they're, like I said, we're in 20 states. Rural First is based out of Louisville, Kentucky, but it serves a lot of farm credits over the footprint of the U.S. Partner with Rural First for their consumer solutions. And so just go to the Rural First website and you'll be able to enter your zip code and find who's the closest person that I can talk to. People are in Kansas, just give me a call. I'm happy to talk to them.
Definitely.
Or want to move to Kansas. I'll put my shameless plug back in, but
there you go.
Happy to talk to people.
And that was my next question is, okay, so go to the website. That's the best way to connect with either you or someone in Rural First. And then can you just spell out the website for us? I'm going to put it in the show notes, but in case someone's driving and they forget later, I just want to get it in their brain. So if they want to try to remember that.
Yes, it's just ruralfirst.com. RURAL, the number 1, ST.com. So it's very simple. You can go enter a contact me, put in an inquiry to be contacted, and a lender will reach out to you.
Fabulous. Anna, this was awesome. And thank you for answering some of my own questions. And now I have this episode to point people back to when they ask me, how do I buy a homestead in 2024? And I'm like, I don't know. So I'll be like, Anna does though. So go listen.
Well, you're welcome. It's been great being on. And it's always fun to do these kind of things. Farm Credit is a mission-based lending institution. We're a cooperative lending institution. And I really feel like serving rural America through Rural First has been one of the most rewarding pieces of my 11-year tenure with Farm Credit, because you really do get to serve rural communities. And so, anyone who wants to join in that rural lifestyle, we are happy to help them out.
Yeah, they're a different kind of people. I agree. They're my favorite people. Yeah.
Salt of the earth kind of people. That's what makes it fun. It makes it fun to work with those kind of people.
Yes, I agree. Thank you again for coming on. And folks, if you have questions, if you're looking to start that ball rolling, take that first action step, ruralfirst.com. We'll put that in the show notes. It's a great place to start. So thanks again, Anna.
Great. Thanks so much, Jill. Take care.